The Triads. They're one of the most powerful and secretive criminal organizations in the world. You've probably heard of them, but do you really know who they are? Originating in 17th century China, these shadowy groups have evolved into a global network that's involved in everything from drug trafficking to money laundering. But what makes them different from the Mafia or the Yakuza? Why are they still so influential even today? In this video, we're diving into the history, power, and secrets of the Triads, exploring how they've built an empire that stretches across the globe. Stick around, because what you're about to discover might just surprise you. The Triads. Mention them to anyone, and they'll probably think of shadowy figures in dark alleys, secret handshakes, and dangerous dealings. But to really understand who they are, we need to go back to their roots, which stretch all the way back to 17th century China. It was a time when the Qing dynasty was at its peak, and many Chinese were unhappy with the ruling power. So, a bunch of rebels decided to do something about it. Enter the secret societies. These weren't your run-of-the-mill clubs or cults. No, they were the kind of groups that operated in the shadows, looking to overthrow the government and restore power to the people. Sounds like the start of a revolution, right? Well, sort of. Their goal was to replace the ruling Qing dynasty with the Ming dynasty, which had been overthrown. These societies were full of people who felt oppressed and wanted to see change, even if it meant going underground to make it happen. Now, what does all this have to do with crime? Good question. These societies weren't just about politics. Over time, as their goals shifted and their activities became more secretive, they started to dive into illegal business ventures. It wasn't long before these revolutionary societies became the Triads, an organized group that wasn't just about overthrowing dynasties anymore. Their main goal, making money, and they were damn good at it. But don't be fooled by the name. The term Triad wasn't really a thing until the British came along. In the 19th century, when Hong Kong became a British colony, the British gave these societies the name Triads because of their symbol, an equilateral triangle representing the balance of heaven, earth, and man. It's almost poetic, right? But while their symbol was all about harmony, their actions told a different story. Instead of fighting for political change, the Triads slowly transformed into a criminal enterprise. As the years passed, their reach expanded and their power grew. By the 20th century, they weren't just influencing China, they were making waves globally. They had evolved from rebellious freedom fighters to highly organized criminals who controlled everything from drug trafficking to extortion, human trafficking, and much more. Their presence wasn't just felt in China. No, these groups began popping up in Chinatowns all over the world. From San Francisco to London, from Vancouver to New York. Wherever there were Chinese immigrants, the Triads weren't far behind. The influence they had on these communities was both terrifying and fascinating. They weren't just gangsters, they were cultural icons in some places. People didn't always see them as criminals. Instead, they were sometimes viewed as protectors of the Chinese diaspora. For years, they thrived, with their influence growing silently and steadily. Now, you might be wondering, how did they do it? The answer is pretty simple. They were everywhere. They infiltrated businesses, gangs, and even political circles. Their influence was so strong that it was hard to know where the legitimate world ended and the criminal world began. If you wanted something done, whether it was importing goods or getting access to certain resources, there was a good chance the Triads were involved. Bribery, corruption, and control were just as much a part of their playbook as violence and intimidation. And it wasn't just about power in the criminal world. The Triads began to control entire industries. In Hong Kong, for example, they weren't just operating on street corners. They owned businesses, ran legitimate establishments, and made huge profits from industries like gambling, construction, and even waste disposal. They were good at staying under the radar while making boatloads of cash. But like every empire built on crime, it wasn't going to stay quiet forever. By the mid-20th century, law enforcement was starting to catch on. But trying to take down the Triads was a different story. They were everywhere. And not just on the streets, but embedded in society. Their decentralized nature meant there wasn't just one person at the top to target. It was a hydra. Cut off one head, and another would grow back. It was as if they were a part of the very fabric of the cities they occupied. The Triads were no longer just a criminal group. They were a force of nature. So, from humble beginnings as a group of rebels hoping to restore a lost dynasty, the Triads evolved into something far more dangerous and far-reaching. They were no longer just about political change. They were about wealth, power, and control. As their empire expanded, so did their criminal activities, taking them into almost every aspect of life. And with this power, they had influence that spanned across nations and continents, touching everything from underground fights to global drug trafficking. But that was just the start. This wasn't the only evolution the Triads went through. What's next for the Triads? How did they adapt to a rapidly changing world? And what role do they play today in modern-day global crime? Stick with me as we dive deeper into the world of the Triads, their inner workings, and their rise to power. If you've ever watched movies about organized crime, you've probably seen the stereotypical Godfather-style Mafia family. A strong leader, a few trusted lieutenants, and a hierarchy where everyone knows their place. But here's the thing, the Triads are not like that at all. In fact, their structure is way more complicated, and understanding how they work is like trying to untangle a knot of wires. They're not a traditional centralized organization. Instead, they're a collection of different, sometimes competing groups, each with its own rules and leaders. Think of them more as a network of criminal empires rather than one big boss running the show. The beauty of this decentralized structure is that it makes it harder to take down. No single head controls everything. This means the Triads can survive a lot longer than many other criminal organizations, even if one or two key leaders get busted. If you cut off one arm, there are many more waiting to take its place. And while this might seem chaotic at first glance, it's actually a pretty effective way to stay under the radar. At the heart of each Triad group is the Dragon Head, which is basically the top boss, but there's a twist. Unlike other criminal organizations, the title of Dragon Head doesn't always stay in the family or go to someone at the top of the food chain. Instead, a group of high-ranking members, known as the Elders, often control the direction of the group. These Elders are the ones who make the big decisions, whether that's approving a new drug deal or deciding how much money they want to invest in a legitimate business. So, in reality, there's often no single leader calling the shots. But how do they make sure everything runs smoothly, especially when everyone seems to be a leader in their own right? That's where the system of loyalty and blood oaths comes in. New members are initiated with rituals that cement their loyalty to the group, and once you're in for life. The initiation process is nothing short of intense, often involving ceremonies, blood oaths, and promises to remain silent. This ensures that members are tightly bound to the organization, and that even if they were caught by the authorities, they'd be less likely to turn on their brothers and sisters. Each Triad group operates like its own mini-mafia, with its own territories and businesses to control. This decentralization means there are lots of opportunities for individuals to rise in rank and build their own criminal empire. These leaders, often called lords or bosses, control smaller operations like drug trafficking, human smuggling, and extortion within their designated areas. They are the ones who handle the nitty-gritty of day-to-day operations, making sure the money keeps flowing in and everyone plays by the rules. They may answer to the Elders, but their power is often based on their ability to bring in cash and maintain control over their territory. But let's not get it twisted. This system is far from peaceful. While the Triads often operate under a don't ask, don't tell philosophy, they also have a history of fierce internal rivalries. With so many different groups competing for control, violence is a real part of the equation. If two Triad factions are fighting over territory, there's a good chance things will escalate fast. And not just on the streets. Sometimes, even members of the same group turn on each other for more power, territory, or money. And when that happens, well, let's just say that loyalty is tested in the worst possible way. So, while it may seem like chaos on the surface, this decentralized model gives the Triads a lot of flexibility. As they move into new areas, they can blend into the local community without drawing too much attention. If one group is doing well in one city, another can set up shop in a new location and follow the same pattern. It's like setting up little empires all over the place, all working towards the same goal, making money. And they don't limit themselves to just one line of business. The Triads are involved in every illegal industry you can think of. Drugs, human trafficking, extortion, gambling, arms dealing, and even things like money laundering and counterfeit goods. Interestingly, the Triads have also become legitimized in some parts of the world. In certain countries, they've invested in businesses that look totally above board, like nightclubs, restaurants, and casinos. On the surface, these businesses appear to be legitimate, but behind closed doors, they might be used to launder money or provide cover for their illegal activities. It's this ability to mix both legitimate and illicit businesses that has made the Triads surprisingly resilient. They can be both invisible and everywhere at once, a criminal empire hidden in plain sight. In fact, this flexibility is what makes the Triads so difficult to dismantle. Since there isn't one big head to chop off, law enforcement often finds it hard to break the organization down. They might arrest a few members or shut down a few illegal operations, but the Triads' vast network keeps going, adapting and surviving. And while they may not have the same family structure you see in the Mafia or the Yakuza, the Triads still have their own form of brotherhood. A brotherhood that's rooted in loyalty, power, and fear. In the next chapter, we'll take a closer look at how these groups manage to expand beyond their borders and what happens when their reach extends into international waters. How does this global reach affect the Triads' power? And how does their empire thrive when they're operating across different cultures and laws? The Triads aren't just confined to the bustling streets of Hong Kong or the crowded back alleys of Taiwan. Over the years, they've expanded their influence far beyond Asia, embedding themselves in cities all around the world. They've become a global network, and like any smart criminal organization, they know how to adapt to different environments, whether that's Europe, North America, or even parts of Africa. How do they do it? The key to the Triads' success in expanding internationally lies in their ability to tap into diaspora communities. Wherever there's a significant population of Chinese immigrants, there's a very high chance that a Triad group is operating in the shadows. These communities provide a perfect cover for the Triads to set up shop, as their activities often go unnoticed by local authorities. Plus, having ties to these communities means that they can run businesses, provide jobs, and gain influence without drawing attention to their criminal activities. Take the Chinatown areas in big cities like New York, London, or Vancouver, for example. It's not just a bunch of Chinese shops selling knockoff watches or herbal teas. In many cases, these areas are like miniature empires for the Triads, with businesses acting as both a front for money laundering and a hub for illegal activities. From restaurants and supermarkets to karaoke bars and massage parlors, these businesses are often a key part of the Triad network. In some cities, the Triads have become so embedded in local life that they've woven themselves into the very fabric of the community. It's not unusual to find a Triad-linked shop owner offering jobs to newly arrived immigrants, making them dependent on the Triads in order to survive. This creates a cycle where the group has both financial power and social influence, as they can offer protection, employment, and other resources to people who might be struggling in a new country. This is what makes the Triads so dangerous. They're not just feared, they're often respected by the people they exploit. But it's not all about just running businesses and making money from local markets. The Triads have mastered the art of global trade in illicit goods, using their international reach to move products and people across borders with ease. Drugs, in particular, have been a major moneymaker for the Triads. Their involvement in the production and trafficking of methamphetamines, heroin, and fentanyl has earned them a seat at the table with the most dangerous criminal organizations worldwide. Fentanyl, for example, is produced in China, shipped to Canada, where it's cut and packed by local criminals, and then it makes its way into the United States. The Triads are deeply involved in the early stages of this process, organizing the supply chain from start to finish. They've been able to capitalize on the opioid epidemic, flooding the market with deadly drugs that have claimed thousands of lives. The Triads don't just deal in drugs, though. They've also established a massive human trafficking operation, smuggling people into countries where they can be exploited for forced labor or prostitution. Many of these victims are lured in with false promises of jobs in places like Europe or North America. Think about it. When you have the money and the power to back a political figure, you can secure protection from law enforcement and gain access to important government contracts. It's a win-win for the Triads, as they continue to expand their criminal enterprises and political connections in the process. This connection between the Triads and politics is also evident in Taiwan, where organized crime has long been intertwined with the island's political landscape. In Taiwan, the Triads are known to have deep ties with the Kuomintang, KMT, the political party that historically led the island's government. Some sources suggest that the Triads have even been involved in election campaigns. providing money or muscle to help certain candidates secure their positions. But the influence of the Triads isn't just confined to Hong Kong and Taiwan. In mainland China, the relationship between organized crime and the government has been a topic of interest for years. The Chinese government, led by Xi Jinping, has a complicated relationship with the Triads. On the one hand, the government cracks down hard on criminal activity. But on the other hand, the Triads are often useful to the government in a variety of ways. For example, Triad groups in Hong Kong and Taiwan have been known to assist Beijing in controlling political unrest. During the 2019 pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, Triad-affiliated groups were allegedly sent in to disrupt protests and intimidate demonstrators. It's thought that Beijing's ability to leverage the Triads helped to quell resistance and maintain the status quo. In this way, the Triads became a tool for the Chinese government, even as they continued to operate as criminals. So, how does the Chinese government benefit from the Triads? The Triads, while operating as criminals, also help maintain the balance of power in places where Beijing has influence, like Hong Kong or Taiwan. They can manipulate the streets, ensuring that protests or dissent don't get out of hand, or they can use their wealth to help maintain a tight grip on business and trade. But, of course, there's a darker side to this relationship. While the Triads may provide temporary benefits to the Chinese government, they also have a habit of corrupting the system from the inside out. Their deep involvement in crime, everything from drug trafficking to money laundering, means that they bring a massive amount of dirty money into the political process. If the government gets too close to the Triads, it risks becoming tainted by the very criminal elements it's trying to fight. It's a dangerous game that Beijing has to play carefully. And the political influence isn't just confined to Asia. In Italy, for example, Triad groups have been linked to organized crime activities such as money laundering, human trafficking, and illegal gambling. The Chinese Mafia has managed to establish ties with Italian politicians who are willing to turn a blind eye to their operations in exchange for financial support or voting blocs. This is the kind of arrangement that allows the Triads to operate with relative impunity, even in foreign countries. While the Triads might not have the same structure or leadership as more traditional mafias like the Cosa Nostra or Yakuza, their ability to blend in with local politics and maintain powerful connections allows them to thrive. They don't need to rely on one big boss. They can make strategic alliances with political figures, business owners, and even law enforcement to ensure that their activities continue without much interference. So, as we look at the big picture, the question remains: how far does the Triads' influence really extend? Are they really just a criminal organization with no political agenda? Or are they secretly shaping the future of entire regions through their ties to power? The Triads have built an empire that spans centuries, continents, and countless criminal activities. From their origins in 19th century China to their global reach today, they have managed to survive and thrive in ways most other criminal organizations can't. What sets the Triads apart is their ability to operate under the radar, blending into the fabric of society while quietly pulling the strings behind the scenes. Whether it's in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Italy, or anywhere with a significant Chinese diaspora, they've found ways to insert themselves into politics, business, and economics, all while maintaining their criminal networks. But here's the thing: as long as there's money to be made, the Triads will likely remain a force to be reckoned with. They've evolved beyond just street-level gangs, becoming something far more complex and far-reaching. And even though authorities continue to target them, their decentralized structure and shifting alliances make it incredibly hard to dismantle them completely. At the end of the day, the Triads aren't just a relic of the past. They are an evolving force with their eyes on the future, constantly adapting to new technologies, new markets, and new ways to exert control. So next time you hear a news story about organized crime, it might just be a little too simple to say it's just a mafia thing. It might just be the Triads continuing their long and twisted legacy.